Where is Calgary pastor Derek Reimer? You'll remember him from feeding the hungry and the homeless on the streets of Calgary in 2020. Remember Arthur Pavlovsky was given massive tickets for doing that. He was out in the cold. It was actually snowing that day. And Arthur and his church were giving food to hungry people. And the cops came up pushing him around like bullies. And they gave him a ticket for an illegal gathering, as if feeding the hungry was a gathering like a party or something. As you know, that became case number one in our Fight the Fines project that's gone on to representing more than 2,000 people. Well, case number two was almost an identical case involving another Calgary pastor charged with doing the exact same thing, feeding the hungry and the homeless. Here's a clip of Pastor Derek Reimer from back in those days.
Derek, thanks so much for joining me today. I really am interested to hear about your story when you were given a ticket by the Calgary police. It's a very similar story to what we've heard from a similar church in Calgary. We spoke with a gentleman named Arthur, and we're kind of curious, does it seem like the Calgary police are specifically following and charging Christian outreach groups in downtown Calgary?
Yeah, it definitely appears that way, and even possibly attacking Art and his church as well, because we saw some differences because we were down at the DI and the same officer who ticketed Art came, but then it didn't bother him what we were doing. He said, as long as the group doesn't get too big, you can preach and you can feed the homeless, that doesn't bother me. And we have that all captured on film and left with that. So we go out there and we feed the homeless and we preach the gospel and we pray for the sick. And it wasn't very even busy on the streets because it's very desolate in Calgary. But there were a bunch of us out there, and cops came, and a couple of weeks ago they were warning me, and we're back out there. We just keep doing it. Cops came right at the beginning, and they were watching, and so they hung out for the next hour and a half, and then take it at us. Be that as it may, we'll be out there this weekend on the corner of Stephen Avenue and 2nd Street and doing what we're called to do.
How much food did the Calgary police take out of the mouths of homeless people because they decided they should be ticketing you for doing such a good thing?
I'm not going to have the money to spend on outreach supplies. I'm not going to have the money to spend on any kind of resources, because now it's spent on tickets if it doesn't get thrown out.
Well, I guess the city hates him for daring to stand up to them. And I don't know what they have, some weird vendetta. But Pastor Derek Reimer was in the news again. He heard about the drag queen story hour at a Calgary Public Library that was targeting children of tender years. That's my main beef with these drag queen events. If some grown-ups want to live that way in a club or even on the streets and be who they feel they are inside, I think I'm libertarian enough to roll with them. But when you are targeting children of a young age, there should be a non-sexual, an asexual time in a child's life. Just let them be kids. It's not the gayness. It's the sexualization of children, gay or straight. That's why we don't bring children into straight strip clubs. Don't sexualize kids. This is really gross. And I can understand why someone who is as motivated by Christian morality as a Christian pastor would be opposed to it. So anyways, Pastor Derek Reimer went to this drag queen story hour, and he stuck his nose into it, and he preached against it, and he interrupted it. He was not physical. He didn't attack anyone, but he spoke against it, and they got physical with him. Here, take a look at this video.
Okay, we don't have our cameras active. We are now calling the police. We have the police coming, so it is your choice to leave or deal with the police.
Very abusive in there.
We are going
for love is love.
Hey,
love
guys.
is like very hateful, very abusive.
Why are you disrupting the program? Because it's already happening.
Because it's wicked. It's guys,
okay. As a parent of kids in here, you need to get out.
Why are you so uncomfortable with this conversation? Because we don't understand the.
So you can see a crime was committed, not by Pastor Derek Reimer, but by those three men who grabbed him and threw him out of there. Now, by the way, I know enough about the law of trespass that if someone is on your property, you have the right to use reasonable force to eject them. But this is public property, namely a public library. I'm not quite sure of the law if you have a private space rented at a public library, if it applies, but I'm pretty sure 3 big guys picking up a man and throwing him on the ground like that is something that should warrant at least police investigation, if not prosecution. But alas, no one was prosecuted by that whatsoever. And that absolutely enraged Calgary's hard left-wing Mayor Jyoti Gondek. For those who don't know Jyoti Gondek, I think all you need to know about her is that the very first thing she did after becoming mayor in Calgary, the oil and gas capital of Canada, although Edmonton would say they are, the very first thing Jyoti Gondek did, what was the first thing? Would it be the unemployment crisis that has racked that province really for 8 years? Would it be the carbon tax? Would it be rising crime? What would the number one issue be for a mayor of Calgary? Well, she declared a climate crisis. I'm not even kidding. Gives you an idea of how woke she is. Anyway, that is Jyoti Gondek. And she has gone full authoritarian. Here's a clip of her a few weeks ago in City Hall when she was calling for a special bylaw targeting her political enemies. Understand that the criminal code applies all across the country. You don't need every city hall or town hall to ban stalking or harassment or assault or uttering a death threat or any real crimes. But Jyoti Gondek wants to ban things that are not crimes. She wants to ban her political enemies from lying. Of course, lying can quite often be a matter of opinion in politics. Each side thinks the other is lying, and it's up to the voter to figure it out. But Jyoti Gondek says that the people who lie that she doesn't like are very special and that they're motivated by hatred, unlike her motivations, which are purely love. Listen to her speech in City Council when she calls for a special censorship bylaw to fine people hundreds of dollars for saying things that are offensive. And of course, everyone can define that word for themselves, right? Here, listen to her speech when she brought in the bylaw.
We had a drag brunch at the Rec Room in the north of Calgary by our community of drag queens in Calgary who have done amazing work promoting inclusion and really raising awareness of how important it is to be a welcoming community. Unfortunately, some members of our population thought it would be a good idea to protest this event, which is, I'm just going to use my opinion, a horrible thing to do. I was very happy that CPS was there to provide a buffer and to ensure that everyone was safe and that the show could go on. My question is, do we have the ability, when a protest is rooted in hatred, to ticket people and shut this down? How does it work?
Mayor Gondek, I will seek to answer that question. I am responsible, of course, as the General Manager for Community Services for our bylaw work, and so it would be a bylaw that we would be pursuing that way. I imagine that there's some complexity to defining what we anticipate to have happen at protests, and so I don't feel like I have the crisp answer that I would like to. Right now, I'm happy to look into that, and I will send a note to all members of council when we have a good, clear answer to your question.
Thank you, GM Black. I appreciate that. I didn't expect you to have an answer immediately, but I do appreciate that you will look into it. We cannot have this kind of intolerance and hatred in our city, so thank you for pursuing it.
Yeah, that's just crazy. And so police obviously saw that bylaw, and they saw that temper tantrum that she had, demanding that they arrest people who oppose her. But the police, at least some of them, still believe in their oath enough that they don't just simply run personal political errands for politicians. Evidently, she contacted the police and prosecutors directly and demanded that they arrest Eric Reimer. And the reason I say evidently is because they obviously refused to do so for several days, which exasperated Jyoti Gondek, who then had a temper tantrum again on Twitter, where she referred to the police and the prosecutors rebuffing her and said she did not accept it, and rather that she insisted that they arrest Derek Reimer despite their objections. That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.